This should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential.
Ladies and gentlemen, in a world of fantasy football podcasts, you can get things like the Fantasy Footballers and Late Round QB with JJ Zacharisian and a whole bunch of other things such as Dynasty 365 and Shoot the Gap. You've decided to lock in with the Costco guys of Fantasy Football Podcast here at Fourth and Frames. I am Rhett Manuel here with Drew Scott, a.k.a. at Twitter, at Drew Theomar, and Nate Markham, at Nate Markham on Twitter. And it's week one, fellas. And so we beg the question, are you really a fantasy football podcast if you don't have a My Guys episode, Drew?
No, I don't think you are. And so we had to make sure, it's literally at the buzzer, but we had to make sure to get ours in before the season kicked off. So it's on the record.
Yeah. And the season literally starts tomorrow night. So we can't there's 1 second left on the shot clock and we're throwing up a heave. But you know what? That bitch is going to go in tonight, isn't it, Nate Markham?
Oh, for sure. If not, I'm going to call foul and go to the free throw line and take my shots there.
Absolutely. And so if you're locking in with us on YouTube and want to support our content here at Fantasy and Frames, the best thing you can do is like this video and then subscribe to the Fantasy and Frames YouTube channel to catch any time a new podcast or short drops from the family. And if you want to listen to us on a podcast here at Fantasy and Frames, you can search for us by name on your preferred podcast platform. And for us, make sure to subscribe to the Fourth and Frames podcast. And do not forget to lock in at fantasyandframes.com for the latest weekly IDP and Dynasty rankings, articles, takes, news and notes. It's all there. So I'm going to start with you, Nate. I did my best last week to give it the old college try as I was sniffly and congested and all these different things. So I didn't really get a chance to catch up with you that much, my friend. So how are you?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. You sounded about 85% better 10 minutes ago. I'm feeling like you might be allergic to either good takes or bad takes. I'm not sure which one Drew and I are going to provide that's giving you that the sniffs.
You know what? To be honest, I just think it's just one of those things just always happen with me. I'm just one of those snot-nosed kids. I'm still that snot-nosed 7-year-old deep down at the end of the day. How about you, Drew?
I'm doing great, brother. I hate that you're not feeling well, but I'm happy to have us three back. Kyle, our wishes are with you, man. Hope that your recovery goes well. We'll be happy to bring you back hopefully next week. Whenever we're really in the thick of it and we start doing our weekly previews, get a little smash or pass going on. One of these days, eventually, all four of us are going to be on the screen together. It might take until week 12 for it to happen, but I got faith that one of these days, all four of us are going to get to do a show.
That's kind of what it is. It's kind of what it's been all offseason. We've kind of had this whole rotating cast thing going on. But you know what? It's given our watchers and our listeners a chance to get a whole bunch of different perspectives. So if nothing else, we're going to take it as a blessing in disguise that we've been able to give people a well-rounded, diverse take, introduce them to guys like Aiden and Kyle, and really just make this Fourth and Frames a brand that much stronger and that much better as we get into this 2025 season. So, fellas, before we start talking about our guys, let's talk about let's get into some news and notes. We're going to start off in San Francisco, where Juwan Jennings is expected to play in week one. Last couple of weeks, Drew, we've kind of seen Ricky Pearsall kind of steaming up these ADPs and redraft. Juwan Jennings is going to play after all. How limited do you think he's going to be? How do you think this is going to affect Pearsall, who, like we said, late in this draft season really started to emerge as a favorite sleeper for a lot of people?
Yeah, I do think you have to expect Pearsall, or you have to expect Juwan Jennings to at least be a little bit limited since he didn't get much work in this offseason. It's really, with Jennings, it's hard to know how much of that limitations was actually due to injuries versus just contract. Like if we knew in the backdrop that he was truly just fully healthy and it was purely contract stuff and it wasn't injuries that held him back, then it would be a little bit easier to be confident to just put Jennings in your lineup. But without being able to know the ins and outs of that, I think you have to assume he's going to be somewhat limited. I do still think that Pearsall was the best bet to make season long of the 49ers receivers because I think Brandon Ayuk's eventual return will probably affect Juwan Jennings and his role more than it will Pearsall's, just because Pearsall and Ayuk are, a little bit more different of players versus Jennings and Ayuk. So I still think he's the best bet to make long term. We'll see if it was smart to take him where he was once he, steamed up draft boards there toward the end of draft season. But I think you can still expect Kittle to be the guy. And then I think it's going to be a weird mix of 1 week it'll be Jennings, 1 week it'll be Pearsall, 1 week it might just be a big CMC game. Like I think it's going to be tough to know really at this point. The two guys that I'm extremely confident in are the two obvious ones with CMC and Kittle. And outside of that, it's I'm sure we'll start to get some clarity as the weeks go on. But as far as week 1 goes, I'm fine with flexing Pearsall. I don't really want to flex Juwan Jennings this week unless I absolutely have to.
Yeah, the way you're kind of describing things almost sounds like a Green Bay West situation where you have a lot of uncertainty throughout that thing. And really, there's only one certain in that entire offense, which is kind of, that Josh Jacobs is going to get his 20 to 25 touches per week at the end of the day. So, Nate, you're one of the fantasy and frames OGs around here. And for the longest time, the slogan around here was keeping 4 eyes on the prize. Well, all offseason, Najee Harris had 1 eye on the prize until this week, and he's scheduled to play against the Kansas City Chiefs. So let's go ahead and let's kind of just, knowing that, let's kind of go through some running back depth chart notes from this week, and let's see, kind of see where we prefer things. So let's go around the frames. Nate, do you want Najee Harris or Amari and Hampton as the Chargers RB1? Drew?
Hampton, absolutely.
Travion Henderson listed as the Patriots running back 3. What do you guys make of that,
Drew? Spoiler alert, we're going to talk about Travion here in a little bit, but look, it's I don't know what it is with coaches and rookies and depth charts, but this is just what they do, and it's nothing to be worried about. Travion Henderson is a guy you're going to be able to rely on this year. Antonio Gibson certainly isn't going to be starting over him, and even though Ramondre might technically be the quote unquote starter, whenever the Patriots offense hits the field this weekend for their first play of the season, I am sure Ramondre will probably be the running back on the field, but that does not mean that Ramondre is actually going to be the starter. So I would.
Drew, while we're talking about Antonio Gibson, have you retired? Have you sold your real estate on Antonio Gibson Island?
Yeah, unfortunately so. I have. I finally had to tap out. I finally had to give up. But yeah, it's sad times. Yeah.
The real estate tank, Nate, it just wasn't great for him.
For
speaking,
us, that was an us thing.
It was him on that train with me.
Yeah, we were conducting that train, and I think we both waited too long, and I mean it crashed into the bridge that was no longer there, and yet at the same time, I'm really glad he's on New England. I say that because if he was on, and I don't know the teams off the top of my head that I can think of, the fit would be just enticing enough that I would hate it because I would want to make him a last round grab and still have hopes and prayers. But knowing that there is zero chance of, usurping Travion in that style of role makes me feel good that R.I.P. Antonio Gibson, R.I.P.
R.I.P. Poor one out for Antonio Gibson. And speaking of rookie running backs, let's take it to DC with our boss Jorge Williams. Preseason darling Bill Croskley Merritt. Speaking of getting steamed up redraft boards toward the end of the season, ended up being a top 100 pick and is now listed as the Commanders' running back 4. Nate, what the heck are we making of this? Is this just another rookie situation similar to Travion or what?
I don't know if it's the exact same as that necessarily, because I don't think Washington feels as comfortable as having a one. Like I think New England going into exactly like Drew said, Ramondre will be the back on the field as the game progresses. Will Travion be the most explosive and highest scoring of the two? That's a possibility. I think there's so many different hands are going to touch the ball in what I want to say, like at or behind the line of scrimmage, from Eckler to Debo, it's tough for me to see a role for Merritt in week 1. And I think this is also more the coach speak than anything else. I think they hear it. I think we'd be stupid to think that coaches and the staff alone don't hear the hype that has pushed up Bill into it. I think this is a tempering, like, hey, they don't want to show their hand potentially, but he was never worth the money or the value, the draft cost of where he was going over the last 3 weeks now. I think we all can agree. Well, I don't know if we can all agree on that. I believe that's the case, but do I think there's still value? I think there's still value, just maybe not week 1.
If he was still going in like the running back 30, like mid 30s range, I don't know where he ended up finishing at, but if he was still in that range, like around like Charbonnet and guys like that, I don't mind. I really don't mind that cost.
Right.
I think that also Eckler is going to be the clear passing downs back. I think that that's his role. I think Jeremy McNichols was the RB2, if I remember correctly. I mean, he's a special teams guy. Like we know what his role is. And so it really just comes down to, do you think that it's going to be Chris Rodriguez or Bill Krosky-Merritt as like the early down grinder?
Right.
And as much as I'd love for it to be Chris Rodriguez, shout out to the Kentucky Wildcats. If they like C-Rod that much to begin with, they could have given him more opportunity last year, and they chose not to. So I do still lean to believing that Bill will be the early down and the goal line back for a good offense, but that's also without factoring in that Jaden Daniels is going to take carries. And like Nate mentioned, there's the wild card of Deebo Samuel being involved and things like that. And so Bill was the Washington running back that I was drafting the highest at the end of draft season. But I didn't have any of them above like running back 30. So I don't know how much that's saying, but I do still think there's a world where he could be the running back you want out of this backfield, though.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then lastly, let's go to Arthur Smith land, where the running back depth chart doesn't matter. And the points are all made up, just like whose line is it anyway. Right. Not only is Caleb Johnson listed as the Steelers running back 3, but Jaylen Warren agreed to a 2-year contract extension. Guys, I've been thinking all along this is probably going to be a 50-50 situation all year. I don't think that really changes with any of this news of Caleb Johnson allegedly being the running back 3 and Jaylen Warren getting a 2-year extension. What are you guys' thoughts?
I agree, and I'm even still more bullish on Caleb Johnson. I don't think it's going to be 50-50 as we get down the stretch, maybe to start the year. But do we remember whenever Devin Singletary got a contract extension before the season last year for the Giants? And
yeah.
That really didn't seem to matter much for Tyrone Tracy, and Caleb Johnson is a better running back prospect than Tyrone Tracy was. And so I'm not particularly concerned about it. I do think that Jaylen Warren will have his role, very similar to what we just talked about with Washington. I think that Jaylen Warren has the Austin Eckler role of this offense, and I think Caleb Johnson will handle the majority of the carries, maybe not right out the gate to start the year, but I think eventually down the stretch, Caleb Johnson's going to end up handling the majority of carries, the majority of touches inside the red zone. And I think he's going to be the running back that you want out of this offense. Jaylen Warren, I know that he's been like a fantasy darling since the day he got drafted, but he has shown us time and time again exactly who he is at the NFL level. And at some point, we just need to believe who he is after he shows us so many years in a row. Like he's the running back 40 in fantasy. It's just, it is what he is. And so I'm not going to let that deter me from taking Caleb Johnson. I still think that he was a great value where he was going as well. And so it's just, I guess it's just a consistent theme of I'm trusting the talented rookies that were drafted to be an effective part of their team over the veterans that have been there for several years, that they still chose to take these rookies, even knowing that the veterans were there. So I think we should just listen to what the teams are telling us.
Yeah, that's fair enough. But Nate, before we get into our my guys, would it be safe to say, just really quickly, yes or no, that Caleb Johnson could potentially be a league winner here in 2025? Just say yes.
Yeah, I'll say yes. Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll
Right.
pander to the crowd.
It was attempted to be a segue here because what better place to get your league winning trophies, swag, gear, whatever it is, than our friends at Trophy Smack, where the code Fantasy and Frames 10 gets you 10% off anything that might have in stock. That might be a big fancy WWE style championship belt. That might be a ring. That might be a big 3-tier trophy. Whatever you want, they've got it, man. All you've got to do is go over to trophysmack.com and use that code Fantasy and Frames 10. Save yourself some money. Hook up your league. Get a big title belt. Do the old school discount double check Aaron Rodgers style as you get a great piece of championship gear and championship bragging rights for your league from our friends over at Trophy Smack. So, fellas, after that poorly misguided segue, let's get into our My Guys episode where there's nothing fancy to this. There's no big algorithm. There's no big criteria. Real talk, Drew, these are just dudes that we like drafting. These are dudes that we think are going to be difference makers here in 2025. And sometimes we look great. Most times we look miserable. But you know what? We always look like we're doing that entire, like, we're going to have fun doing this. So, Nate, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. Dallas Cowboys. We've all kind of seen the tea leaves all off season. Running back room, so. They made a big trade. We know CeeDee Lamb is there, but it's the other wide receiver in Dallas that you're all in on for 2025. So tell us about your first guy here for 2025.
I think the lead in was kind of a reverse segue as well, is that if you're looking to get some of that hardware and who can help you win, it's all about opportunity cost. And that's where George Pickens is my guy for the 2025 season. One of my guys. And it starts with, like I said, that opportunity cost. Because if you look at the ADP, and I'll use the collective of the entire draft season where he was going around pick 60, wide receiver 26, somewhere in that range. And you're looking at some of the other, the upside plays that are around there. And there's plenty of them in that range. But you have to kind of plant your flag and go with a couple of the reasons why. And first and foremost, not that it's the end all be all, he's in a contract year. And I know contract years aren't the only factor, but obviously people are, monetarily motivated. Monetarily motivated is check mark number one for George Pickens. Number two, what we've seen so far is that in this new Schottenheimer offense, they've moved George Pickens around supposedly, which for a person of his size, speed, athleticism, if he's not just the perennial X and they do move him around, that just opens up even more plays than just being out on an island, which I think he can succeed at, especially when you have CD taking a lot of double coverage from the slot, where even the safeties are moving over and getting more of those one-on-ones. And that's where George Pickens can excel. If you look at the real-time ADP, other drafters are seeing that. He's moved up into that wide receiver 21 range, which if you can get him there, I still think there's value. Again, I use the word opportunity cost. My expectations for George Pickens is to be around a wide receiver 15, 16, somewhere in that general range, which if you're getting him as the wide receiver 26, that's significant. It allows you to attack other positions earlier or make him as your wide receiver 2/3 is a great way for success. And how is he going to have that success? A lot of that, as you just talked about, Rhett, he's going to do that on the, from the arm of Dak. It's a pair, a pairing, a match made in heaven for what you're looking for. You're looking at Dak, who really go back to 2023 when he was healthy, second most air yards, looking for that explosive plays. George Pickens, let's go to 2023 again, among wide receivers with more than 50 receptions. He was fourth in yards before catch per reception. He was first in that metric in 2022. Deep threats. Dak has no fear of going deep, to the point where last year his deep ball completion rate was fourth overall. So where George Pickens goes, I believe is just immense value. Many people are going to be concerned a little bit with it's CD's team. Can they support 2 wide receiver, in the top 24? And I think we've seen it over the time that there are, rare instances by that example, but this is probably the most glaring example of a situation that can. I'm taking George Pickens over another similar receiver, similar situation of T. Higgins. If I had the choice, I'm leaning George Pickens. Yeah, I really am. And I think that I'll get to another, conversation on Dak, but I do. I think that while both they're very similar, Cincinnati and Dallas are basically very parallel, except Cincinnati has one thing Dallas doesn't. Cincinnati has a running game. Dallas does not. Sorry, Javonte Williams, truthers, but they don't. And both defenses are bad. The little icing on the top, if you will, is the whole Micah Parsons leaving. I don't know what that means for that offense to pass the ball even more, but
I think so.
I'm all in on Pickens. I love him. I hate that his value continue to rise, but I'm guessing that maybe at least I think Drew's in agreement. Rhett, am I crazy? Is this a my guy, not your guy, or is he going to be an our guy?
Dude, I have been very hot and cold on George Pickens over the years. I'm going to be honest with you. We came in year one. If we remember coming out of college, there was one time that was thought he was going to be the 101 in Dynasty drafts. That didn't quite end up happening. Had a solid first year. I was all in after that first year. Then he kind of starts to get the reputation as a bit of, just a jump ball, deep ball guy, whatever. But he goes to Dallas this offseason, and dude, you're right. The stars are aligning for him to have a huge year there. Running game isn't there. Dallas is doing everything it can to make sure they are just as pass-heavy as possible, like getting rid of their best pass rusher. Like, everything's aligning for George Pickens to, like you said, and for Dallas to support 2 top 24 receivers this season. So, yeah, I'm with you where that is a very distinct possibility of Pickens perhaps being an our guy this season. Why not?
He very well could be. This is pretty much a clean sweep because I love Pickens as well. I'm not to the point to where I'm considering taking him over T. Higgins, which is where he is truly my guy for you at that point, which is what this is all about. But I've loved him at value all off season. I think the parallels that you made between Dallas and Cincinnati are spot on. Bad defenses, really, really solid quarterbacks. Obviously, Burrow is a better quarterback than Dak. But if we're still living in a world where people think that Dak Prescott isn't a good NFL quarterback, I don't know what we're doing. Like it's been clear as day. The dude is I feel like that's like a do you know ball test or not? It's like you just ask somebody how they feel about Dak Prescott. But with the talent of Dak, the lack of the run game, the bad defenses should put them in holes. I think it's going to be between Cincinnati and Dallas for which team leads the NFL in pass attempts this year. And so to think that 2 receivers can't finish in the top 24, I think is silly. And so I love taking shots on Pickens where he's going. Even as he's gotten a little bit higher here recently, I still think that it's a price worth paying. So I couldn't agree with that.
The barometer for me to determine, like, when you think, am I really this vested? Is this my guy? Is when one of the guys at work in his dynasty league, he has both CD and George Pickens, and trade conversations have come up where he would be moving George Pickens. Won't get into the details of that. And I thought immediately, I was like, yeah, absolutely. You don't need to have 2 people from the same team. They'll be battling. You'll have ups and downs. But when the dust settled, I said, he's probably one of the only situations where I would take both. And Cincinnati probably, Cincinnati being the other, I would take T. And that's the nice thing is when I said I would take Pickens over T, it's not just in a vacuum, but it's not a vacuum. One's going around, pick 35, and the other one's going around pick 55. So you can
have them both.
You can have them both. Exactly. And that is most likely. Usually I don't like going into leagues seasons when I have 2 number 2s, if you want to say that about them on a team, but I would feel really comfortable if I had T and Pickens and as my 2 and 3. I wish I had a team like that. I don't, but maybe there's time for another draft, guys. Let's hurry this up. I can still draft tonight.
Yeah, we got time.
Yeah, so that's George Pickens. And so, Josh, we appreciate you joining us. He wants us to rate his 12-man PPR. Joe Joe Burrow, Tony Pollard, Aaron Jones / Jordan Mason, depending on who starts, Amon St. Brown, Brian Thomas Jr., Sam Laporta, JSN, the Eagles defense and special teams, and Brandon Aubrey as a kicker. Nate, how you feel about this lineup?
I like it. I mean, that's me. And I hate the trying to decide who to start between Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason. I think that could be a first half, second half not problem, because it could turn in that Aaron Jones from at the beginning of the season is the guy to go with. And then Jordan Mason with health in the second half could really prove to be that guy. But I mean, you have 2 top 8 wide receivers, top 10 in Amon-Ra in TJ, and JSN. I think I feel like I was
top 12
underweight on JSN this year. Like, as far as I always thought I could take him the next round, and I figured that was a mistake. So I like it a lot. What Drew, what about you?
I love the receivers. Obviously, you got 3 of my top 12 receivers. Anytime you can accomplish that in a 12-team league, I think you're doing really well. So, looking at the team, I'm assuming you started off the draft, Amon-Ra, BTJ, JSN.
Yeah, triple tap. That's what I was thinking too.
And so whenever I do something like that, and even just in general, really, I guess where I would have went different than Josh is I typically don't like to spend up at both quarterback and tight end. So I would have chosen one of Burrow or Laporta to take in those middle rounds. And then instead of if I take Burrow instead of taking Laporta, I would have punted tight end and taken a couple of other running backs. I think Tony Pollard is going to get off to a really great start with Tajay Spears being on IR. Like, I think you're going to have 4 or 5 really, really solid weeks of Pollard being a workhorse. And then I think he'll still be solid even whenever Spears comes back. But then having to deal with the whole Aaron Jones, Jordan Mason thing is tough. But you have the receiver depth there that if you needed to make a move during the season, I think you have the flexibility to do something like that. So overall, I think that this is a really solid team. I think that you're going to be a contender with this team. I don't know enough about kickers and defenses to know. I know the Eagles DST
Right.
is supposed to be one of the better ones, and that Brandon Aubrey is supposed to be one of the better kickers. And we just talked about how much we like Dallas's offense, and so I think this team should absolutely be a contender. And I think the draft was really solid overall. And I love the receiver start. I think that you give yourself a strength at a spot, and you did exactly that. And Burrow could, we've already talked about how he could lead the league in pass attempts. Once again, he could very easily, throw for 5,045, something crazy. Like it's in his realm of possibilities to just go crazy once again. So I like the team. I think you should be a contender.
And I think he should be a contender too. But my only hang up, and this is just a personal preference, is as we've kind of gotten into the lore and got deeper and deeper into game theory and whatever, I kind of just like having a quarterback with a little more rushing upside. But if you're going to have a pocket guy, Burrow's the guy to go with. So no issues there at the end of the day. So let's keep going on my guys. Drew, this is definitely a you and I guy situation. I've been beating the drum of this guy, and honestly, his quarterback all offseason. Feel like the quarterback's undervalued. I felt like this guy coming out of the NFL draft. I said it in the NFL draft show. Like, this is a guy who should immediately see 130 targets. That might be a low end number. It could be 150 or 160. Ted McMillan has been slowly creeping up boards, but hasn't really gotten above that wide receiver 20 threshold through draft season. So I feel like he's a great value, but you go ahead and talk us through why he is your guy heading into 2025.
Yeah, man, I love Ted McMillan this year. The only thing I don't love is that he doesn't like to be called Ted, and that T-Mac is acceptable, because I can't, as a 90s baby, I just can't call him
Tracy McGrady. That's it.
That's reserved for Tracy McGrady. I'm sorry, and I love you, Ted Roll. I'm about to talk about you extensively, but that's the only thing I can't get behind, and so I got to keep myself from not calling him Ted, because that's gonna be really hard not to do. But Ted Roll McMillan, look. His Fantasy Pro ECR is at 50 overall and wide receiver 22. I've got him at 30 overall at wide receiver 15. So basically 20 spots higher overall than where his ranking is at ECR, which might explain why I've gotten him in basically every draft that I've done this summer up to this point. Whenever I look at both McMillan and his situation, I just don't really see much of anything not to love. Like just looking at Tetaroa, the talent himself, he's coming off back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons to end his college career, and he checks basically every box I'm looking for whenever I'm looking at college receivers for fantasy purposes. He was an early producer in college, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons as sophomore, as a junior, but he also had over 700 yards and 8 touchdowns in his freshman season. And just from the jump was extremely productive. And the quarterback play wasn't that great either. He was an early declare, great size, early breakout age. He had across his college career, he had a 2.34 yards per route run and a 0.106 first down per route run, both very solid numbers. And then he got the draft capital as well. And the early first round receivers with that kind of draft capital are typically been great bets to make in redraft the last few years. They just the success seems to translate at an NFL level. And whenever you look at the situation that comes with the draft capital, he's in a Carolina Panthers receiver room that was desperate for a go-to guy for Bryce Young. So it makes sense why they invested so highly in Tyrell McMillan. Like we know Jalen Coker is going to start on IR, which sucks because I do like Jalen Coker. I think that he's a really solid receiver. But then beyond that, we're talking about Xavier Legette. We're talking about Hunter Renfrow because they traded away Adam Thielen because they thought they were going to have Jalen Coker to play in the slot. And so it's just, Legette's fine. Hunter Renfrow, whatever. Like Tyrell McMillan is just so clear and beyond the best pass catching option in this offense. And this offense was probably a little bit more pass happy last year than people expected or remember. They were 13th in pass rate over expectation in neutral game scripts. And then per friend of the show, Derek Brown, D-Bro over at Fantasy Pros, last year the Panthers were 4th in red zone passing rate and 12th in 10 zone passing rate. And so if Bryce Young continues to improve, Rhett, like you have laid out continuously this offseason, or if he just plays as well as he did down the stretch last year, I think that this offense is going to surprise a lot of people and call me crazy. But I think that with those red zone and 10 zone passing rates that they carry over this year, I think the guy that's probably going to benefit the most from that is a guy that caught at least 8 touchdowns in all 3 of his college seasons and has the typical size and build to be a red zone threat. So, I mean, just, it essentially comes down to Tyrell was a great college prospect. He got great draft capital, and he landed in an offense that's trending in the right direction that was in need of a go-to guy. So he's been an easy click for me all offseason, a must draft, and now a my guy.
Yeah, and I mean, no arguments here because I've been all in on the guy since the beginning. But we're going to go back to our comments because our man Cap for Life wants to know who to start in the flex spot, Evan Ingram, Juwan Jennings, or Ollie Gordon. He also follows up by adding a tight end, TJ Hawkinson or David Njoku. And then he wants to thank us for everything we're doing for him. So let's start with the flex question, Nate. You going with Ingram, Jennings, or Ollie Gordon?
I'm going to eliminate Ollie Gordon, personally. I really wanted to be Juwan Jennings. My concern is exactly what Drew said earlier, is if I knew this was not a calf-related hold in, taking time off, I would feel much more optimistic and a little more comfortable. That being said, as much as I don't love Evan Ingram, from where like some of the hype about the Joker role has kind of
there it is. Him, take a shot.
I still think the matchup against Tennessee is a solid one, and so I'm gonna go with the Evan Ingram in this particular triumvirate choice.
And Drew, you taking TJ Hawkinson or David Njoku at tight end this week?
Give me David Njoku. In games that Joe Flacco's been the starting quarterback, he has been a set it and forget it, damn near top 5 tight end. I think across the games that Flacco started the last time him and Njoku played together, he was the tight end 1 overall. Now, I'm not expecting him to be the tight end 1 overall, but that's the type of upside he carries whenever Joe Flacco's the starter. So as long as we know that Flacco's starting, I'm rolling Njoku out there.
This is a Keith Fleming, friend of the show, DFS take, but I will stack that Cincinnati Cleveland game as much as possible with Njoku. Maybe a Cedric Tillman than with the Cincinnati players, because we all know Cincinnati's defense is bad. It wouldn't shock me if well, I don't think Cleveland makes it a close game. I think there will be pieces of that offense that will definitely be DFS worthy.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. That's going to be an interesting one for sure for DFS. But fellas, let's you guys have talked about your guys. You talked about George Pickens.
Hang on.
You talked about Ted McMillan, and the boy Gator J is in the building. What?
I think I disrespected him. I think that the hype was getting a little. I think we misread a little bit of that Joker role, the way that Sean Payton was using that vernacular.
The Joker role is a joke. Let's be honest.
Oh, see, attack him now, Gator. See, I was just partially against you. Rhett's going full head first.
Good to see you, Gator. It's good to see you, man. But Rhett, we've given our first set of my guys ready, so hit us with yours.
All right, so look, you guys have had your cute little fun with your mid-20s wide receivers and whatever. Guys, let's go straight for the jugular. And matter of fact, since Gator is in the building, let's make Gator J happy, baby. Because my first guy for 2025 is none other than the Oregon product, the dynamite Bucky Irving, baby. Listen, I know it's an easy call. I know that Bucky Irving is a top 10 fantasy running back heading in throughout the offseason. Like, I get all these things, but at the end of the day, there's a thing that I like when we're talking about my guys, and there's a question I like to ask myself, and it's this. Is there a scenario where I see this player going in the top 10, finishing as the first overall player at their position? And with Bucky Irving, yes, it is very extenuating circumstances considering he does share a position with Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley. Like, I get it. It's a long shot. But there's a path for Bucky Irving to get there. And it all just talks about how he did things last year. I mean, yeah, he got ramped up toward the end of the season, but when the smoke cleared, you're still talking about a guy who had over 1,100 rushing yards, 5.4 yards per carry, and 47 receptions while playing less than 50% of snaps in 2024. He had 244.4 PPR fantasy points. That landed him in the top 15 running backs. The opportunity share is only going to go up this season. If he did that on 50% of snaps, what's his ceiling to look like if they up his role this year, which I think is a high possibility. If they go to just giving him one more snap in every 10, and he's playing 60% of snaps, what's the ceiling for him? What's the ceiling for a guy who had a 4.9 yard, 2 yard per carry last year, a breakaway run rate, and yards created per touch that were all within the top 5 to 10 running backs in the position according to Player Profiler? A guy who exceeded his expected fantasy points per game by over a point per game. A guy who, as we said, just kept emerging throughout the season, kept grabbing more and more of that role, grabbing it by the scruff, just being one of those dudes that was just undeniable by the end of the season. Because here's one thing that I do know. Efficiency tracks. Like, we're not talking about touchdowns. We're not talking about any of these non-sticky stats. We're just talking about a guy who came out in year one and was good at football. Like, period, end of story. He showed he can run between the tackles. He showed he could do everything. He showed he could catch passes. And he's going in with, in all likelihood this year, as the undisputed lead back in that backfield. Now, is there a bit of concern that Liam Cohen got the best out of Baker Mayfield? Do we think Baker Mayfield is maybe being a little bit gassed up because we don't know what it's going to look like without Liam Cohen or Dave Canales? I mean, yeah, that's a possibility. But if Baker Mayfield takes a step back, Drew, what's the clearest path for them to probably still producing on offense?
It's probably giving the ball to the running back that he did not get his role last year just because somebody in front of him got hurt. Like he took that job away from Rashad.
Yeah.
White.
Yeah, exactly. So at the end of the day, I mean, if you're going to go with a guy, go with a guy that didn't get there by injury. Don't go with a guy who, I don't know, let's just say call for Washington, traded away their starting running back. At the end of the day, Bucky Irving went into that backfield and took it from a guy who finished as an RB1 in 2023. And I don't see him giving the job back here in 2025. So lock it in. My first guy for 2025, Bucky Irving, baby. Let's go.
Yeah, I completely agree. You mentioned the efficiency. He had the 9th lowest stuff percentage. He was 3rd in missed tackles forced per attempt. He was 4th in yards after contact per attempt. And then when you look at the passing game among running backs with at least 20 targets, he was 5th in yards per route run. He was 13th in yards per target, 4th in yards after the catch per reception. Like, he can run the ball, he can catch the ball, and he didn't get there just because the guy in front of him got hurt and then he stepped in and they're like, well, we should just keep giving him touches. Like, Rashad White was healthy, but they kept giving Bucky Irving more work, and Bucky Irving just kept looking better and better and better to the point where it was like, all right, we can't continue to not give this guy more work. And so coming into this season, what we know now, I don't know how that's not going to be the case once again. I love drafting Bucky Irving where he's going. I think it's a great call.
Yeah, the Bucky Irving concern that I had, if there was any, was the loss of Tristan Wirfs. And of course,
that's fair.
That's a huge one. But
yeah,
the positives of, if you're going to wipe away the devil's advocate conversation with Tristan Wirfs' injury, is that Bucky Irving didn't excel outside runs. He actually excelled between the tackles. If you have a tackle that's going to be out and you have Baker Mayfield potentially needing to get rid of the ball sooner, who's the most likely recipient? One of really 2 people. One being Emeka Egbuka, because he runs more the Chris Godwin role. But 2 will probably be more design screens to one Bucky Irving. And if there's any way to support, if his total rushing upside is capped because you lose a premier offensive tackle, it is only even more so elevated if you can include more of the passing game, which he had already excelled at. So I have been underweight on my Bucky Irving shares, but I believe that I'm going to regret that more as the season progresses. And I would like to make him an hour guy. I don't think I've earned that right by not having enough shares of him. So I'll from afar, he'll be my guy. He'll be my cousin.
My guy by proxy.
There you exactly. go. My cousin. You were just talking about offensive line injuries, and it does matter. And along with Bucky Irving, as Gator pointed out, Bijan also is dealing with some injuries to the offensive line in front of him that was expected to help out his case. Did you end up moving Bijan down at all close, as we finished up draft season once we got the news about the offensive line injuries?
He was still my first running back. The gap between him and, for me, was Jahmyr Gibbs was 2. It was even closer. I could have made a case for Gibbs, and yet every time I thought about it, the idea of, all right, at least lion's share of workload without Caleb McGarry is still a little bit better than a somewhat of a split with David Montgomery, not knowing what Ben Johnson's leaving is going to mean for both usage. These are some of the unknowns that, like, I'll allude to this little segue of on Sunday mornings for our pregame show. That's one of the areas that we're going to take a look at. We're going to try to focus on 1 or 2 instances per game or per week to say, focus on this. And this might help you learn a little bit as far as who is going to have changes as the season progresses. But that's all I'll talk about there. We'll leave the rest for Sunday morning, 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. Central.
Like a pro. Well done.
What a plug. And then, Drew, let's get to your second guy here in 2025. Listen, let's just lock it in right now, because I don't think just in terms of sheer excitement, there haven't been a lot of people that lit up week 1 of the preseason and probably boosted his draft position more off of 1 kickoff return and a couple of touches than TreVeyon Henderson did. So you included, like, even preseason, you were all in. So, like, if anyone's gonna talk Travion right now, you're the man for the job. So just preach to the choir, baby. Tell them about it.
Yeah, and I struggle with it, man, because I was like, man, this guy is like so popular now, and like I don't, is it even right to make him my guy whenever everybody loves him at this point? But I could not do it, man. Like Travion, he was a guy that I loved coming out of college. If he would have came out after his junior year, he would have been the RB1 for me in that class. For my money, I thought he was the second best running back behind Ashton Genty in this class. Obviously, the NFL disagreed after they took Hampton in the first round, and Henderson didn't go into the second, even though technically they only went like 15 spots apart. So, not a huge gap in terms of where they were drafted in the NFL draft, but the first round draft capital does matter. History shows us that. But I don't have like a fancy prospect model, but I got a little spreadsheet that I use to help evaluate rookie prospects for dynasty purposes. Just look at some benchmarks that have led to NFL success whenever you can check so many boxes. And there are 10 inputs or boxes that I look for whenever it comes to the running backs. And Henderson checked 8 of those. He wasn't an early declare, which now in the NIL world, I care less about. As long as you were good enough to have declared by your junior year if you wanted to, and you didn't need your senior year to like dramatically raise your draft stock, I don't care as much about the whole early declare thing anymore now that we're talking about some NIL money that these guys could be getting. But that wasn't the case with Henderson. Like I already said, he would have been the RB1 for me after his junior year if he would have chose to come out. And his yards per route run was slightly below the threshold that you look for, but he was still top 10 in his class in that as well. And his pass catching ability is not in question for me. So one of the boxes he did check was the second round draft capital that he got whenever the Pats took him with the 38th overall pick, which I think speaks volumes. Like Lord knows the Pats roster had plenty of holes to fill. They could have chose to go anywhere, but instead they took a running back with a premium pick inside the top 50. And I know Ramondre is still there, but this is a brand new coaching staff. They have no ties to Ramondre Stevenson. They weren't the ones that gave him the contract. And I feel like the Patriots coaching staff told us during draft season how they felt about Ramondre whenever they spent such a high draft pick on Henderson. And I'm not going to sit here and say that Henderson's going to play 100% of the snaps, anything like that. But I think it's going to be hard for them to find a reason to take him off the field. He can run the ball. He can catch the ball. And Chris Ballard, the coach GM, called him one of the best pass blocking running backs that he evaluated coming out of college. And look, we remember, right, Ramondre Stevenson, he got benched last year because he had fumbling issues, right? And then whenever he got benched for some fumbling issues, that created opportunities for Antonio Gibson, who also ended up having fumbling issues. You know who doesn't have fumbling issues? Travion Henderson. He had a whopping 0 fumbles across his college career. So the two things that typically get rookie running backs in trouble with ball security and pass protection, Henderson's not going to struggle with either of those. And so I think that there's such a clear talent gap between Henderson and Ramondre that I think that Henderson's going to take over this backfield sooner rather than later. And if you listen to us back on July 2nd during our AFC East preview, he was cheap enough for me to be able to call him the value from the Patriots. He was the running back 25 in the ECR, and at the time I had him up at running back 19. Since then, he's went up from the running back 25 to the running back 17 in ECR, but I'm still ahead of ECR to this day. I've got him up at running back 15. I've got no problem taking him in the 3rd round. But if you were able to get him in the 4th round during draft season, you should thank your league for the absolute gift that they wrapped and delivered to you. I love Travion Henderson, man. Like I said, I don't care if he's become the most popular guy in the fantasy football world over the last month. I had to make him my guy.
Yeah, he's the prettiest guy at the prom right now. Let's just call it what it is.
He is. It's a reality. And of all things to boost his draft stock, it was a kickoff return. But what are you going to do?
Yeah. The thing is, people look at tape and they're like, man, that guy's explosive. For a lot of people, I don't know how many NFL people spend the time to sit there and nerd over college ball like we do during the regular season. I get it that football is football, but most people who were in the know knew what to expect with Travion Henderson. And I think that you didn't mention that I really love about him and the fact that why he could emerge into a 3-down role as this year goes on is he was widely regarded as the best pass pro guy in this draft class as well, too. So it's just there's a lot of things going on that you just have to like about it.
Absolutely.
All right, so Cap for Life has one more thing he wants to ask. It says he has Baker, Barkley, Bucky, JSN, Worthy, Tyler Warren, and the Denver defense. Thoughts on that? First, I need to know how many teams. But if we're just looking at this in a bubble, dude, you killed it. Absolutely.
Yeah. Great squad. Two top 10 running backs for me. Worthy obviously is going to get some steam at the start of the year with Rashee Rice missing the first 6 weeks. Tyler Warren, I think that he's going to hit the ground running immediately in Indy. He could very well lead that team in targets. Who knows? I think it'll be between him, Josh Downs, Michael Pittman. We'll see how that breaks out. But it's there's a world where Tyler Warren ends up being the guy there. So I think he did great, man. And he
for the record, he said 12.
Yep.
So it's impressive.
And then one other question: RG Harvey or Jalen Warren? And this is a pretty easy one for me, but I want to make sure we don't disagree. So, Rhett, you usually do
RJ.
the questions. I'll give you RJ.
Yeah, RJ.
Nate.
I wish I could break this down into first half, second half. It'd be really nice to have because I would say first half would be even the first maybe 4 games would be Jalen Warren, and then from that point going forward would be RJ Harvey. As much as I think early in the season I would like to have my share of Harvey to see what he can do and how he can take that role, I still worry more about J.K. Dobbins having a greater role in that offense to start the season off than what myself and many others are hoping would happen. Whereas I think we know that Jalen Warren will be superseded by Caleb Johnson from a talent perspective. Both are, usurped by talent, I think is what's going to happen. RJ Harvey takes over based on talent, and Jalen Warren loses his job based on talent.
Right. Yeah. It's comfortably Harvey for me. I've got him at running back 18, and then I've got Jalen Warren down at running back 36.
So here's the question. I'll follow that up. Let's play the game of what if real quick. What if J.K. Dobbins does not have an injury at all this season? He stays healthy.
I'm not concerned. No, it doesn't for me. The reality is J.K. Dobbins is a free agent the entire offseason. They could have chose to sign him at any point. Instead, they chose to spend second-round draft capital on RJ Harvey while J.K. Dobbins was still a free agent, didn't touch him, and then post-draft ended up bringing in Dobbins later on. If he was really that much of a priority for this coaching staff, I think that they would have looked at signing him much earlier. And I just, I think them signing J.K. Dobbins, I think it says more about how they felt about Audric Estime and Jaleel McLaughlin, which they ended up releasing Audric Estime. I think it was more so that they weren't satisfied with what they got from those depth guys, and they knew that behind a rookie in RJ Harvey, they would need somebody dependable. And so I think that's where the Dobbins play comes in. But Sean Payton has a long history of multiple running backs being involved, but I think Harvey is just at this point in their careers, I think Harvey is a much more clearly talented back, and I think the talent will end up winning out. So even if Dobbins stays healthy all year, that doesn't change the Harvey outlook for me.
Fair enough.
And speaking of outlook, Zach Whitaker wants to know about our Evan Ingram outlook for 2025.
Speaking of Evan Ingram, we were talking about him a little bit earlier. While we don't know how much smoke there is with the Joker role, something that we share, I think, on this show just across the board is whenever you get beyond like the elite top couple guys in the fantasy drafts, we're really looking for guys that we believe in the talent, but also that they have a realistic path to being at least a top 2 option in their passing offense. And I think that Evan Ingram has a clear path to that. Like Cortland Sutton is going to be the number 1 target in this offense. But then beyond that, it's a mix of Pat Bryant or Marvin Mims. And I think that Evan Ingram was brought in to be that number 2 option. And so if we see the year 2 jump from Bo Nix I was not a Bo Nix believer. I'll be the first to say it. I was out on Bo Nix last year. And so he clearly, at least at this point, has proven me wrong. But once you get beyond the top 3 tight ends between Bowers, McBride, Kittle, I've been a big proponent of just waiting in drafts and grabbing one of those later guys. And Evan Ingram has kind of been in that bucket, just depending on who your draft prefers. And so I don't mind Ingram at all where he was going in drafts. And I think that, whenever he can stay on the field, whenever he can stay healthy, he has shown the ability to be a producer for fantasy purposes. And so as long as he can stay on the field, I think he has a clear track to be a top 2 target in this offense. And so I think that he could end up paying off where he was going in drafts.
Yep. Agreed on all of that. So Nate, I just have a quick question for you before we get into your second guy for 2025. You've always been a Kansas City Chiefs guy. And so I'm just so curious as to why, when going through your My Guys for 2025, you took not 1, but 2 Dallas Cowboys. You're doubling down on this Cowboys offense. Dak Prescott is your second guy for 2025. I mean, let us know, brother.
It's, again, I use the word opportunity cost. And that, to me, is 100% why Dak makes sense. I will use this caveat that in a 10-team league, that is about the time when I would actually take one of the top, what I'll say top 3, maybe 4, not including Joe Burrow as one of the quarterbacks if I were to take one early and say the 3rd into the 3rd round. Because in 10-team leagues, I think the separation at some of the onesie positions can pay off more so than the 12-team leagues. But I'm waiting. And when I'm faced with the option of Joe Burrow, or I'm looking at the situation where the names of, Patrick Mahomes, who I love, but it is what it is, Baker Mayfield, etc. I know that I'm just going to wait, and I'm going to take Dak Prescott for everything I said earlier. If you look at the healthy seasons, which is him playing 16 games, he's never finished outside of being a wide receiver or QB1. So, I mean, historical data has backed up that. And let's look at the wide receivers that he's been successful with, or wide receiver. It's pretty much been CeeDee Lamb. Now he has 2 of them in him. And I'll talk about all the things I said about George Pickens. It's just set up for success. Everything I said earlier carries over into Dak, and I'm going to hold true to that. And that's about it. So we can move on.
Fair enough.
I completely agree. He was a top 5 quarterback just a couple of years ago, and his second passing option was a mix of Brandon Cooks and Jake Ferguson. And so now, I think George Pickens is a clear upgrade to be the number 2 option. I think this is arguably the best pass catchers Dak has had at his disposal since back whenever he had early CD and Amari Cooper. Dak has been one of my favorite late round targets as well. If you're not going to grab a pass catcher, or if you're not going to grab a quarterback that has rushing upside, you need to grab one that's going to have a ton of passing volume, and Dak projects to have just that. So I do expect, as this week gets close, going into, since game's tomorrow, many questions about QB, this or that, this guy or Dak. And tomorrow against the Eagles is going to make that really tricky, because I'll plant my flag and say he's my guy. But then when given the situation, like I've had to make, and at least I've taken, and I have felt pretty comfortable, saying I might start someone like Trevor Lawrence over Dak. I wouldn't do that, but the game against Philly just has me a little concerned as far as what the high upside. But, Thursday night game, you want a piece of it, but do you? It's kind of tricky, but it's so much fun to have, especially if you have both of my guys. You get Dak and George Pickens taking the top off against Philly, especially garbage time. Yeah, you go in, and I can fully see that happening, having 22 points between the 2 of them going into the 4th quarter, and then boom, all of a sudden Dak's got 26 and Pickens has 17, and you're like, hey, you know what? Salvage and garbage time. That's what I like. The junk.
Not half bad.
Sanford and Son.
Let's all count the same.
Yeah, I'll take it.
So yeah, we're going through, and so far we've talked about here in the second round of guys, Travion Henderson, Dak Prescott. Guys, I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I mean, heading into this throughout this draft season, it's been all about nailing the top 3 rounds for me, because it's so hard to kind of differentiate what those middle rounds look like this year. So, Drew, I figured if I was going to do anything, I might as well try to win your heart with this second my guy and go with Drake London. And the The answer is simple, man. You look at a guy like Drake London. There are a lot of efficiency numbers you have to look at from last year. First off, 27.2 target share, was fourth among wide receivers. The slot rate, despite being a 6'4" monster, big body of a wide receiver, jumped from 18.6% in 2023 to 39.6% last season, and he had a league-leading 2.57 yards per route run from the slot last year. 24 red zone targets, 10 in goal-to-goal situations, 18 end zone targets, and he had 52.6% of Atlanta's targets inside the 10 last season. So what does all this mean for us? Well, first off, no surprise, Drake London took a leap. He was an efficiency monster. But the kicker was, and that in those last 3 games, they had that quarterback change. And this is where the gas comes from. We're throwing kerosene on a fire that already had gasoline on with this Michael Penix thing, which, by the way, for the record, if there's a breakout player from Atlanta in 2025 that I'm looking at who has an outside shot of finishing as a quarterback one, it's Michael Penix going where he is, but that's neither here nor there. With Michael Penix under center, Drake saw 37 of his routes run being targeted, and he averaged 3.52 yards per route run in Penix's 3 starts. He averaged 23 fantasy points per game in PPR formats, and that jumped up from 15.1 fantasy points per game with Kirk Cousins when Michael Penix was under center. So I think the thing came down to is this. Maybe you had some of that rookie thing going on where you're just looking for your best guy. Maybe it was some of that. Or we could see a continuation of the thing we kind of saw at Washington where when Michael Penix needed a big play, he was going to Rome Tuesday at the end of the day. And I think that could just be where we are. And we talked about guys and we asked the golden question. Can they finish as the first player at their position? With Drake London, that question is that answer is absolutely yes. It wouldn't shock me to see him at the end of the season with 160 targets, 170 targets, pulling down 100, 110 catches, knocking on 1,400, 1,500 yards, and then possibly having double-digit touchdowns. He's just a guy that for where he's going, which was in that wide receiver 9 to 12 ADP throughout the offseason, I mean, he's a guy that you can get at the top of the second round and very easily get first-round value at the end of the day. So, I mean, it's just hard to ignore a guy with that kind of profile, that sort of physicality, that sort of production, and that sort of usage. Drake London just feels like a slam dunk for me this year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have to say it, but you know that I love it. I've been dying to pick at the back of the first round this year because I know I can get Drake London. And then with some of these ADPs here lately, you compare Drake London with Nico Collins or Puka Nacua. It's just like a beautiful start. And while touchdowns might not be a sticky stat, end zone targets tend to be a little bit more sticky because, I mean, you're earning those targets. And he's been right there toward the top. I mean, he has tremendous touchdown upside. The target should be there. If I had to pick a receiver outside the top 5 with a chance of finishing as a wide receiver 1 overall, Drake London would be at the top of the list for me.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, there's just no question about it with that. So let's keep rolling, guys. Let's get into our third guy. And Nate, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. There was a little bit of talk about him a while ago. Tyjae Spears missing the first 4 games. Drew mentioned the idea of Tony Pollard being off to a slam dunk start. Clearly you're buying in because he's your third guy heading into 2025.
Yeah, I'll stick with the theme of the opportunity cost again, because that is all about how I establish my guys for the most part, people that I know I can get almost in every league if prioritized. Drake London is, unless I have the first through 5th pick, I don't have a chance to get him, which I hate. But Tony Pollard, you can prioritize, and he can be your RB2, and will be. I'll say he'll be the best RB2 that you could put when you're not drafting back to back or in the first 3 rounds, and it's very stepchildish as far as like how he's disrespected for what he's done. When you look at the last 3 years of 1,300 plus all-purpose yards, and last year, what is he? He was third in total rushing yards after contact per carry. So even if you get into a situation where he was in last year with a really porous offensive line, which they've made vast improvements. And let's talk about they being the team, the Tennessee Titans have built this offense to help take some of the pressure and some of the load off of him. I mean, Cam Ward, I think we've said numerous times, is probably one of the most disrespected number one picks, who you add that ability with another player we may talk, Calvin Ridley, who you have two offensive pieces on this, two fantasy pieces on this offense, should take some guys out of the box. You look at what Tony Pollard can do. He's more than capable in the passing game as well. And I don't believe, I really don't, that when Tyjae Spears returns, that he's going to eat into that workload. And we saw it last year when Spears was gone, Tony Pollard was leaned on heavily from a volume standpoint. And that's what I want to see. I want to see someone that can handle 82% of the team's non-rushing quarterback attempts, which we saw last year. A 46.4% touch share also led the NFL during those same weeks. So here you have a guy who could potentially be a workhorse back with pass catching chops on an offense that, while might not be spectacular, is trending in the right direction with a schedule that is, the AFC South is not exactly a world beater that he has to concern himself with as far as defenses. So Tony Pollard, earlier, I think Cap for Life had him as running backs. That was partly why I like that team so much, because I see Tony Pollard first and I'm thinking, all right, he waited and he got good value at running back, at least one. That says a lot. If I think there'll be a lot of teams this year, hopefully mine, that have Tony Pollard as a piece of that fantasy, championship.
Yeah. I mean, he's the offense should be better. The volume should be there. He should be a clear workhorse for an offense that should be trending upward. Very, very easy pick for me in drafts this year as well. Couldn't agree more.
So, Drew, I'm going to get to my guy in a little bit because apparently I missed the Tennessee Titans memo that you and Nate shared with each other. Because you're going to go with Calvin Ridley. Missed another one. So just go ahead and talk about Calvin Ridley and why he is your guy, another one of your guys here in 2025, my friend.
Yeah, but the only reason I don't have more Tony Pollard this year is because him and Ridley are going very similar ranges in the draft, and I just choose to click Ridley instead. And I maybe I'm a little bit biased because I'm a Cam Ward believer. I think that he's going to step in and immediately make a big difference for this offense. And whenever we talk about the pass catchers, there's a very clear number one target for Cam Ward for me. Once you get past Calvin Ridley, you're talking about the ghost of Tyler Lockett, the expected wide receiver 2, Alec A.O. Minor. And I like A.O. Minor, but don't get me wrong, but I don't think that he's a threat to be a top target in this offense over Calvin Ridley. Same thing with Chig at tight end. I think that he could be a decent dart throw at tight end, but I don't think he's a threat to be the number one option. And the quarterback upgrade is there. I think that that's very clear. I don't think anybody would argue that Cam Ward is an upgrade over what we saw from Will Levis last year. So whenever I present these numbers for Ridley, just keep in mind how awful the Titans quarterback play was last year, and the fact that Ridley was doing all of this despite the bad quarterback play and not because of the quarterback play that he was getting. Of the 53 receivers that had at least 75 targets last year, Ridley was third in yards per reception. He was 11th in missed tackles forced per reception. He was 23rd in yards after contact per reception, and he was 27th in yards per route run. So not crazy, insane, elite numbers, but really solid whenever you consider the context. And so now whenever you consider, if you believe that Cam Ward is an upgrade, like I do, whenever you look at what Ridley had to deal with last year, he was 51st in catchable target percentage. 51st, man. Like Romo Dunze and Amari Cooper were the only two that had a worse catchable target percentage last year. And he was also 33rd in design play percentage. So the coaching staff was just doing him no favors whatsoever. No design touches, no screens, nothing like that. And despite being 17th among receivers with 117 total targets, he was 44th among receivers with only 4 end zone targets. So he had plenty of targets, but none of them were coming in the money areas because the Titans weren't ever getting down there in the first place. And I expect that to change as well. So whenever you consider the fact that he should be getting a lot more catchable targets, The offense should be in scoring position a lot more often. There's plenty of room for Ridley's numbers to grow and improve. So the Fantasy Pros ECR has Ridley as the wide receiver 27 right now. I've got him at wide receiver 22, and I've been taking him in a ton of drafts because of me being ahead of consensus on him. So he, again, just had to be my guy for me this year.
Yeah, it's by far the biggest conundrum I face, as well as just what you were saying. I want both Pollard and Ridley,
right?
But
yeah.
I have a hard time justifying on the same team two players from the Titans, as much as I see the value in both of them. So I diversify. So I have Calvin Ridley in about half of them. I have Tony Pollard in the other half. And in some, I have a combination of them. It's weird, but I love it. And if you take those, the qualifying targets for uncatchable passes, it expands even further, where he's like 80th overall. So it was just a horrible situation. I can't, stamp of approval. He's an hour at least. He's an hour. Rhett, is he? Can you make?
We're gonna go 3.
Listen, I hear the arguments. I just have to go back to the fact that Calvin Ridley throughout his career has had many solid seasons and only one truly elite season where he played with a Matt Ryan playing at an MVP caliber level. So for that reason alone, I got to look at the historical context of Calvin Ridley and just kind of take a step back, guys. I'm sorry. Right.
Well, we are betting on Calvin Ridley to be successful.
I see what you did there.
See what I did there?
Yeah, I like that.
Thanks.
Yeah. And meanwhile, I'm just betting on him to fail, apparently. But it's fine.
Apparently so. But there should be at least one more your guy that you're not betting to fail that you haven't gotten to talk about yet. So why don't you hit us with that?
All right. So last season, heading into 2024, I was very, very vocal about this rookie wide receiver class, in particular the wide receiver 1, which was Marvin Harrison Jr., and saying that he would underachieve his draft value. And that came to pass. Great air yard numbers, but just usage wasn't there as he should have been used. Still ended up very solid, 800 yards, 8 receiving touchdowns. A fine rookie year, but by the standards he was set, some people considered him underachieving. I've come back this offseason. I'm kind of predicting a little bit more of a breakout for Marvin Harrison Jr. and my guy, which is Rome Odunze with the Chicago Bears. There's this world where for some people, for some reason, people seem to think that either Marv has to break out or Odunze has to break out. Never mind the fact that for some reason, they can both break out, being that they play on different teams. And it seems pretty simple to me when you look at the quarter with the coaching upgrade, offensive line upgrades, all these different things. With Rome Odunze, you're getting Marvin Harrison potential at a mid-round ADP price, which for me is a slam dunk situation you want to talk about. I mean, this is a guy that is still hovering around those wide receiver 40s as we headed toward the end of draft season, despite the fact that we're looking at a guy who last year, you mentioned it, only had one of the lowest catchable target rates in the league. And that wasn't necessarily an indictment of his ability as a receiver. The bottom line was this was the last year, the Bears offensive line was terrible, and Caleb Williams kind of got himself in a lot of trouble trying to use his legs probably a little bit more than he should have. I'm expecting a Caleb Williams leap in year 2. Keenan Allen is now out the door. He's back in San Diego. Yes, they did replace him with Luther Burton and Colston Loveland, but the way I see it is this. These are all year 1 guys in the Ben Johnson offense, but a big thing that people kind of underrate is this. Right after the college season ends, these college guys in prepping for the combine, they just constantly have to go. Now they're training for the combine. Now they're trying to get their 40 times down. Then they have OTAs. By the time they get to training camp and the season, they haven't really had a real off season to recuperate. Roma Dunze went through all that last season and finally had an off season where he can get stronger and take a breath and focus on actually bettering himself here in 2025. So what I'm seeing is this. Keenan Allen is out the door, and Roma Dunze was still targeted 101 times last year. There's a very real chance that that number probably gets into the 120 to 125 range this year as the second, possibly first option in that passing offense, because I think he has the upside to possibly take over as that wide receiver one there in Chicago. We know the Ben Johnson coaching upgrade. We know people praise his work ethic and how dynamic he can be. We saw the flashes last year. There were some 100-yard games sprinkled in there. There's just a lot to like about a guy when he's going at this value, with this sort of profile, and with everything expected to be better in Chicago. It's just hard for me to ignore the growth for Roma Dunze in year two. I've gotten him in a lot of drafts because I like where he's going, and it's kind of in that big dead zone where running back kind of just falls off of a cliff, and there's kind of a prime spot to take a wide receiver. I find myself taking a ton of Roma Dunze in that situation. So at the end of the day, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But if with Roma Dunze going in the mid-40s as a wide receiver, there's no reason why he doesn't have the opportunity to finish as a mid-level wide receiver too here in 2025.
Yeah, the Bears pass catchers has been one of the hardest things for me to try to figure out how I want to project it going into this year. It's been a really tough situation to figure out, but at cost, Roma Dunze has been my favorite to take shots on so far this draft season. So I hope you're right, because I've got some Dunze as well. So I don't have as strong of feelings about this as I do some other players, but of the Bears pass catchers, he's the one I've taken the most shots on and that I like the cost of. So here's to hoping you're right.
And look, Drew, I couldn't just play it safe this entire time. My other two guys were Bucky Irving and Drake London. Once again, we said, is it a fantasy football podcast if you don't have a My Guys show? And it's not a real My Guys show unless you take at least one shot in the dark and hope for the best. Because after all, you haven't really made it in the fantasy world unless you end up getting tagged on fantasy receipts. So this could be my fantasy receipts this season, guys. This could be my fantasy receipts moment. Fingers crossed, baby.
I know. I didn't have that luck the likelihood that I can repeat from last year's My Guys, as far as from a success rate, is impossible. I can't get much better, but I'm hoping that, well, we touched on one thing earlier, Rhett. You said I had 2 Dallas Cowboys. I got 2 Cowboys and an ex-Cowboy. So I got a lot of Cowboy adjacent as well with Pollard. So I never thought that would happen. That is
get this man a jersey. It's done. He's done.
I've got, you know what, I actually have
an NFC team.
No, I have not. I would. I actually have a Cowboys jersey somewhere around here. I won it, and it's still in the package, and it's be up for, maybe it'll be an award for somebody who gets all their My Guys correct.
Yeah, guys, you heard it.
That wasn't me last year. I can tell you that much. So here's it. You said it can't get much better for your My Guys compared to last year. Mine can't get much worse. So.
And guys, I think we heard it here first, is that Nate Markham is pledging his loyalty to Jerry Jones as we head into this 2025 season. Much like we are pledging our loyalty to our friends over at Fast Draft, so where we can make sure you can download and subscribe to the Fast Draft app today and use our promo code FRAMES, which will get you that deposit match of up to $50 in credits. You can play the Origins game, which is only rookies. We talked about Travion Anderson, Caleb Johnson, all those guys, Cam Ward, that Flex 4 game where you can play your favorite players for the upcoming season. D-Up, which is like the Flex game, Flex 4, but with the IDP players. It's 20 seconds, PPR formatted, 6-round best ball drafts, perfect for on the go, and also those itching to get that fantasy football draft need satisfied. Again, that's our promo code FRAMES. That deposit match up to $50 in credits. Start drafting faster with the Fast Draft app, ladies and gentlemen. So, boys, another one in the dust. And before we get out of here, we've done bold predictions throughout our divisional previews. I'm just kind of going to go off script here. This isn't even the show sheet. I'm going to put all of you on the spot. Drew, give me one bold prediction for the 2025 season in general. Doesn't have to be fantasy related.
All right, so completely unbiased. Ignore the Rams stuff behind me. The Los Angeles Rams win the Super Bowl this year, and then Matthew Stafford retires off into the sunset. Now a two-time Super Bowl champion, and you know, I get to end the season happy.
Nice, Nate.
Yeah, my bold prediction is Drew's tested for drugs and finds no drugs in his system after that comment. Super Bowl. No, you know what? I'm going to stick with the My Guys theme. Dak Prescott outproduces Joe Burrow in points per game on this season.
Nice. I like it.
And I'm going to go ahead and go to the AFC for my bold prediction of the 2025 season. The New England Patriots are a playoff team this year.
I like it. I could see it. Wild card team for sure.
So that's what we have, guys. We talked about our My Guys, and we briefly, just in case you guys are wondering who our league winners we thought was going to be, Nate says Devon A-Chain, Drew said Kenneth Walker, and I said OG Fourth and Frames, Lover Boy, Nico Collins. We're all in on those guys being league winners this year. And next week, guys, join us next Wednesday as we kick off the week 2 of the fantasy football season. And we're going to talk about players you want to smash as you start and pass as you sit. And we will also give you players to target and to stay away from next week. So for our boy Nate Markham at Nate Markham, for our boy Drew Scott at Drew Threemore, for myself, Red Manual at R Manual Sports, we are Fourth and Frames. Toodles.